Well, hello there. Welcome to this BlockParty build-along tutorial. My name's Scott. Today we're going to build a Spinal Tower. Let's get started. Well, I'm glad you're joining us on our first build-along tutorial. Now, the idea behind these tutorials is that you can go get your dominoes if you want to and build along with us. You know, everyone learns a little bit differently, so this type of tutorial can kind of show you a little bit more hands-on. Now, of course, it's unscripted. I'm going to try to mostly film this uncut, all in one shot, so keep that in mind if I stumble over my words or say something silly, or if I make a mistake even. But that's okay, you know, nobody's perfect. We're not striving for perfection here. You know, this is a creative process, and really anything goes. As, you know, the legendary Bob Ross once said, there's no such thing as mistakes, only happy accidents. So I'm sure we'll have plenty of happy accidents along the way. Let's get started and look at our palette of colors of dominoes we're going to use today. Now, this is what I'm going to use, but by all means, if you're building along, you know, you can use whatever you want. In fact, if you're just getting started with Spinal Towers, it might even be easier just to use all one color. You know, that way you don't have to worry about picking out different colors and can focus on the build. But if you want to build along and make a Spinal Tower exactly the same, here's what you'll need. We've got ourselves 9 red dominoes, 5 white. We've got 26 blue, 31 green, 14 yellow, 14 orange, and then you're going to need about 20 or so random other dominoes. I just grabbed, you know, a handful of these powdered blue dominoes, so those will be used to make the line to knock it over. All right, so let's jump right into it. Now, with the Spinal Tower, there's 3 main parts of the structure. The foundation, which is definitely the most complicated part. Okay, so we'll spend most of our time talking about it. And then the body, and then of course the top. So if you haven't already watched, this is actually part 3 of a series about the Spinal Tower. It's the third and final part of the series. Part 2 is a tutorial that kind of goes into some depth on the parts of the Spinal Tower, but definitely check those out. Okay, so let's start out with 2 blue dominoes, and we can talk about the first thing to consider when building a Spinal Tower. So the angle that you place these 2 dominoes will determine the overall shape of your Spinal Tower. So the original Spinal Tower has a flat back, and it's kind of shaped like a trapezoid, basically, an isosceles trapezoid. But you know, you can of course angle these first 2 pieces on the back of the structure in different ways. I like to build it with them just with a slight angle like this. It kind of makes like a hexagon shape. But there is different things I've been learning about the characteristics of how they behave and how you want to trigger them to knock them over, and we'll talk about that later. Today we're just going to build a traditional Spinal Tower, the original. So we're going to start with our 2 blue dominoes, and then what we want to do is put a space between them equivalent to about the width of 1 domino. Okay. And next one we're going to place is a white one in between these 2 dominoes. Well, that was silly to knock it over. See, already making happy accidents. So we just take and place it between them. Now, keep in mind throughout this tutorial, to make it easy for you guys, I'm using random different colors to represent the different parts of the structure. Kind of makes it easier, you know, as you're learning and kind of getting an idea of how it's built. The white dominoes that I'm using are only going to be in the foundation, and I'm using these white ones separately because they will be removed later. I call them the temporary foundation. We put them there to just help build the structure, but then when we're ready to arm it, to knock it over, we need to remove those, in essence weakening the foundation and making it easier to topple the structure. The Spinal Tower is an extremely strong structure as far as domino structures go. You know, they're not exactly strong structures. There's nothing bonding them together but gravity. So, you know, this has been probably the most challenging part of the Spinal Tower, and developing it was figuring out an effective way to topple it. And there's still some room for improvement, I think, you know, so I'm hoping, and you know, some other people get their big old brains on it too, and we can find some even more interesting ways to knock it over. So let's keep going here. Now that we've got that white one in place, let's go ahead and place some blue ones here on top of the other blue ones and just slide it up next to the white one. All right. And just do your best to keep everything straight. It doesn't need to be perfect, but as close as possible. Next, we're going to take and place a vertical white domino in between, and just line it up with the center of that gap that you'd created between the bottom 2 blue dominoes. Okay, and about the length of 1 domino away. Needs to be a little closer, because here's what we do next. We put a white one between the corners. It doesn't matter if this white one's overhanging a little bit. These pieces, like I said, are temporary, so the main idea is just that they're stable. There we go. Okay. Continuing on with the foundation, I'm going to use green for the sides of the tower. We're going to place a domino like this. Now, when I'm lining this up, keep in mind that this edge of this green one right here lines up with the edge of the bottom blue one. Don't put it out all the way to the edge of the top one, because think about it, it's going to put pressure and weight down right there, and it's going to make this one a tip that way. That's no good. Don't worry about this bottom green one being perfect or anything. Just make sure that it's completely underneath that green one. We're actually going to be sliding that one around later. It doesn't necessarily matter if it's in there perfectly. Okay? And let's do the same thing on the other side. And don't worry about the angle of these quite yet, because we'll do that here in just a moment. So we're going to use red for the front. And the first two dominoes that we place are going to be our trigger dominoes. Later, when we're ready to knock the tower over, these are going to be the ones that actually initiate the process. So make a T shape where you place one on its edge and one vertically. Make sure it's nice and centered. And then slide it up into the front, lined up with the center of the structure. And you want there to be a gap about the width of one domino in between those. Okay? So once you got that all positioned and centered, and it's awfully wobbly though. There's something going on here. Well, that's alright. Once we get some weight on it, it'll hold itself steady. So next thing we want to do is take our green ones, and you can slide them into place. And what I do is close one eye and just line it up so that this outside edge lines up with that front corner. Okay, and the reason being is the next pieces we're going to place are going to be dominoes that go across the top, and they need to line up. And you want them as close as you can to the edge. It makes a more stable tower. Now I can tell I've got this red one too close, at least for this side for sure. I'm going to slide this green one back a little bit. Take time during your foundation build, because of course everything else sits on top of this, and it's also the key component that helps knock the tower over. So you want to make sure that it's, built well and lined up well. I'm going to slide that back a little further. I mean, you can of course build your tower to have overhang on all the different sides. It looks pretty cool, but it is definitely less stable. It's just the way it works, and I'll explain in a moment why. Next, we're going to place green dominoes between the front red one and those side green ones. Now, when you place these dominoes on top, if you look from the side, you can see that I have about the width of one domino sitting on there. Okay? Keep this in mind, because if you take and you turn around and put too much of the dominoes on top of each other, let's say like this, I mean, it will work, but the problem is that's spreading out the load over a greater area, which makes it more prone to twist like this. Okay, so it is a little bit trickier to build that way, but it looks cool having it all compact. If you have it just about the width of one domino, that puts all the weight onto a smaller surface area, therefore it's greater pressure. Okay, or I don't know if pressure is the right word, but I think you understand what I mean. Next, we're going to take a white domino. It's our final temporary foundation domino, and we will place it right in the middle of these other two white ones like this. So you can get a good look at that before we start building on it. Those white ones will be gone by the time we're done. Okay. Next, we're going to place blue between the white and the green. And it's a good idea to look from above. Make sure you got it all lined up. It's okay if your spinal tower isn't perfectly symmetric. What's most important is that each level up lines up with the level below. That way the weight translates from the top down in a nice even fashion. If you have these different ones in kind of offset from each other, then you can think about the weight's going to want to twist and pull on the structure and make it go in different directions, and it becomes unstable. So that's really the most important thing. Having it symmetric is more cosmetic. All right, so that's our foundation. It's the most complex part, but it's not that hard once you know what you're doing. Okay, takes a little practice. Next, we're going to continue onward and start with our front red one. Double check it for straightness. Now, I'm going to give you a kind of a disclosure here. I normally build the Spinal Tower with the front facing towards me, so this is kind of like building backwards for me. I kind of feel like I'm that feeling when you're trying to write with your non-dominant hand. It just feels off a little bit, but we'll make do. And then I'm going to go ahead and place that green domino and grab 2 orange. We're going to use orange and yellow for our actual spine. So we can begin building the spine now by placing the orange one between the white and the lower green. Now when I'm building this original Spinal Tower, I normally try to make a 90-degree angle between that green and orange one right there because it looks good. Of course, the orange one's going to stick out a little bit. You could put it up more towards the front and have it stick out less, but I kind of like the way it looks when it sticks out. And also, I think this makes a more overall stable structure because if you look, it's going towards the center of the whole structure, therefore helping spread the load out more evenly. And I'll put another one in right here. Ooh, careful, almost hit this table with my knee. Place our green one here, and grab another blue one for the back. Okay, that's the first part of the spinal structure. It's a 2-layer process, and we just repeat it over and over again in the body until we get our tower as tall as we'd like it to be. So next we will grab a couple greens and continue building the side walls. I like to look with my eyes lined up parallel with it to help me make sure that I'm lining everything up straight. There we go. And then we'll take 2 blues and link the back side up as you'd suspect. And then we're going to use yellow for the other part of the spine, so grab 2 yellow and we place them right here. And with the original Spinal Tower, since it's kind of more of a compressed structure, it's wider than it is deep, I have a little bit of the yellow stick out the back as well. Helps keep it just more balanced. Just think about where the orange one is sitting and where that blue one's sitting, and you want to try to balance it where you have an equal amount hanging off on either side. Makes sense. Also, another thing for a more stable structure, the wider you can get this part of the spine, the better. If they're really close to each other, I mean, it'll work, but it seems to be less stable, and that makes sense. You're just spreading the load out more evenly. All right, we're just going to keep building now and keep repeating that same pattern. I'm going to show you, I'm going to build this whole thing right on camera. Hi, sorry to interrupt. Future Scott here, coming to you from the editing room. I'm going to scrap that idea. This video is already pretty long, and I'm not going to have you sit there and just watch me do the same thing over and over again. Take a look at this diagram. What you need to do is build these 2 sections of the Spinal Tower. If you're building along, you'll need to build 6 of each of these sections, so a total of 12 levels. And make sure you stop on the level that you see on the right. All right, let's jump back in and put the top on this tower. Instead of placing another red one up front, we go ahead and place our orange spine, and we leave the front empty. And think about it, if that red one was there, it'd just be sitting by itself up top, so there's nothing else on top of it. It's not like linked in with the rest of the structure, so there's no point in putting it there. It's just a risk for falling off. And there's no point in putting green ones on these back sides because there's nothing going to be touching them. So next we place our blue, and then we just complete our spine with 2 more yellow. And the reason we're completing the spine like this is we want the weight. The weight is what ties it all together. So what I like to do, since I usually have been using 5 different colors on the Spinal Towers, then I take 1 of each color and I use them for weights for the final top of the structure. I think it looks good and it kind of ties it all together. So we place those up top and we're done. We just built the Spinal Tower. Well, we're not done. We have the tricky part next, which is to arm the structure. So I'm going to turn the cameras off for a second so I can reposition them. That way you guys can have a better view of what we're doing here, because this part is the hardest part and it's the part that's taken the most development and figuring out. So prepare yourself. We're in for it. Okay, so as you can see, we are in the back of the spinal tower now. So we're going to go ahead and start removing the temporary foundation to prepare the tower for toppling. Now, the way to think about this is, okay, the white dominoes are obviously the ones that are going to be removed, okay? And currently, the spine itself is being supported by those, okay? So the whole structure got multiple support points. So as we remove these white dominoes, the spine is no longer in contact with the ground. All the weight with the ground gets shifted to these blue ones, the green ones on the side, and the red ones up front. And the spine at that point tightens in with those structures and becomes part of, like the weave. Okay, so this is the critical part, especially with the smaller tower. It's more difficult, believe it or not. I'm more nervous doing this on a tower this size than I am on one that's a meter or two tall. So the first piece that we need to remove is this white one right here. And you just want to do it as gently as possible, okay? If you move too many other pieces, like for example, if this white one that's up high, I don't know if you can see it inside there, probably not, but if it moves too much, I've noticed sometimes the side walls will kind of cave inwards and things will start moving all over the place. So just be very, very careful with this. What I like to do is just take it and kind of wiggle it is what I do, because you can get a feel for which side's moving. Usually one side moves easier, like this side, the left side's moving a little easier this time. But you want to be careful, because if you move one side too much, you can make the blue ones next to it twist. So see how I'm just kind of gently pulling it outwards? This blue one just moved, but it seems okay. Let's get that one out. Oop, it fell already. So usually they fall when you pull it out, but sometimes they don't. Let's see if that moved quite a bit. There's enough weight where I've never had one fall over because the white ones hit the other pieces, not once. There we go. So see, they all just fell. So now the spine is just part of the weave of the structure and it's not touching the ground. You just can remove the white ones. What I do is I take these blue ones and I just hold the top one very secure as best as possible and just slide that lower one over. I have kind of big hands, so I can't really reach in there too easily unless I do this. But if you have tiny little hands, maybe you don't have to do this. Just like that. Push it. Okay. So, there we go. That's step one complete. Now we need to go up front and get the trigger dominoes set up. All right, here we are up front. Ooh, I just hit that one. I didn't mean to. So, if you notice, this is incredibly easy to move right now. In fact, it probably wouldn't even topple if we were to, I don't think it would. In fact, I might regret this, but let's just test it. Yeah, see? It's doing nothing right now. So it's really easy to set up, but it's also tricky. Okay. I gotta get it back in there. There we go. Make sure it's nice and centered still. You want to hold the top one in place and slide the lower one out. Since this one's so loose right now, we can't quite get it on the lip because it'll want to tip over, so get it about as far as you can. And this just helps with the next step, because when we go to move these other ones back, the weight's going to shift onto this, and so it'll be a lot easier to have it in place right now. Okay, looking good. So I'm just going to move the camera over a little bit, and we're going to move the green one back. So I'm going to talk about this because I put out a video about not doing this, but I've come to find out that with this original Spinal Tower, it actually does make more sense to keep doing this. It's when you're building the oblong one. That's when, you know what, I'm just going to jump cut real quick to a scene where I'm going to explain why. All right, so let's put on our engineering hats for a minute and really talk about this. So I'm going to use these two examples of spinal towers because they're the two that I've built the most, but these concepts will apply to any of the spinal towers, okay? So I released that video a few days ago explaining that I don't think it's a good idea to put that side piece in on the bottom of the foundation, the one that you slide from right here to the back. But later, as I've experimented a little bit more, I came to realize that it didn't ever seem to be an issue with this original type of spinal tower. It was only when I was making this type of spinal tower that it seemed to cause a problem. And what would happen is I would slide it back like I explained in the part 2 video, and then when I knock out the trigger domino, it stayed standing. It only happened twice on larger towers, but still, it got me thinking, okay? And what I came to realize is that it's really all about the center of mass. And there's no real hard and fast rule that we can use here because every single spinal tower is going to be a little bit unique based upon the shape that you make it. Okay, so let's look at these two examples. Here's, just a crude drawing. So when we think about it, okay, the center of mass is going to be approximately somewhere at the top of where these orange dominoes are. So for this tower, let's think of the center of mass running through the structure about right there. I'm going to draw a line. Okay, and then for this other tower, same thing. It's going to be about right above the spinal, the orange ones, excuse me. Okay, so now that's interesting because now we can look and compare. Look where these lines intersect. Okay, here, and then on this one they're much higher because of the shape of the profile. So when we slid those dominoes backwards, they're ending up about right here and here. Same thing here and here. See? So then now that makes some more sense, okay? Because even though I knocked out this front domino on this style, it still could have balanced and held itself together based on that shape. There we go. Aha, that's the big secret. But here's the kind of wild card to throw into the mix. As we build these spinal towers, you're not going to make it perfect, okay? There's going to be little tiny sways left and right and forward and backwards that are going to play a factor into this. And since we're really dealing with, this fine pivot point, you're going to need to just look at your spinal tower each time you build it and decide. And for the most part, these ones, you should leave that piece in, okay? Because there's plenty of room, okay? Right up in here. These ones, I don't think it's a good idea. So definitely let me know if you have any questions. Put them in the comments, and I hope you guys have a great time building spinal towers. All right, so let's go ahead and slide this one back. You want to put your finger on the back green one to just hold it in place. And just gently, see it's trying to move. Oop, really wiggling. This one's not liking it at all. This is what the smaller towers are more difficult. Man, I'm getting all kinds of friction here. There we go. Now it's better. Whew! That was a little nerve-wracking. Okay, so I'm going to do the same thing on the other side real quick. Hopefully this one isn't as bad. No, see, this one slid real easy. So most of the weight is shifted on that left side right now. These red ones should be tightened up now. Looks like it's leaning back a little bit. What we're going to do here is get it right on the lip. Okay. Now I'm just going to move these green ones back even farther just to make sure that the center of mass is in a position to topple. Man, this one is really squirrely. See how well it holds together even how much it's moving around? Oh shit! See how well it holds together even how much it's moving around? Oh shit! Okay, well, that's hilarious actually. Okay, I'm gonna rebuild it and not screw up. And I'll show you guys how to topple it. Hello again. So I went and got myself something to eat and rebuilt another spinal tower. And while I was building this thing, I was thinking to myself, I wonder how many of you think that that wasn't real, like I meant for that to happen because of all the silly stuff I do in my videos. And no, I promise you that was 100% a happy accident. I did not mean for that tower to fall over. At this point, we just need to get this thing finished up, so let's jump into where we left off. All right, so I managed to do it this time without tipping it over, which is nice. So we need to go ahead and place our dominoes through the spinal tower. Now, we trigger it from behind with this configuration. So the first domino we want to place is right here. Now, it's really important that this first domino be enough distance away from these red dominoes that it does not touch this one. if it happens to touch this red domino, even just that back little corner barely touches it, especially with the bigger spinal towers that have more weight, it'll fail every time. I've had it, I couldn't believe it, literally like less than a millimeter of that domino was touching that top red one and it still didn't work. Kind of what I've been doing is getting up in front of it. I can reach my fingers around, it helps me center it, and then you can look through the crack between this green and red one right here, and it kind of helps you line it up really well. So that's pretty good right there. That shouldn't touch that top one. This small of a tower, it doesn't have that much weight at all pushing on these red ones, so it pretty much works every single time. But especially for the bigger towers, that's something to really take into consideration. So what we're going to do then is continue to build a line of dominoes. The way I do it is, here, let me get on the other side. Since my hands are too big to reach in there, I have to set one down, and then I slide it in like this into position. Works fine. So you want to build a nice tight line with as many dominoes as feasible, especially with a bigger tower. You know, I'll put 20, 25, 30 dominoes in a straight line, but with a smaller one like this, it doesn't take many at all. Even 10 or so can do it. So let's just build this blue line up, and then we're ready to see if this baby works. All right, she's ready to tumble. Now you'll notice with these smaller towers, because there's not as much weight compressing it together, a lot of times they more crumble and fall forward. The bigger towers hold together a little bit better and tend to tip over, and I think they look way cooler, but they're all good. All right, here we go. Yay! All right, so to wrap up this first build along tutorial, I wanted to give you 3 tips and tricks to help you with your spinal tower builds. And the first one, get yourself some sort of little stick to have it laying around. It's perfect for making little adjustments in places that you can't quite reach your fingers. Second tip is, if you want to build a really tall spinal tower, it can be useful to find yourself a nice flat piece of wood that you can clamp or set up somewhere and then build against that. It's nice to have a guide to build against. It'll help you to avoid having your tower start leaning forward, which is the most common mistake I've made. All right. And tip 3, get yourself a chair that can move up and down, or a stool, preferably. I use a drum throne because I'm a drummer. Game changer. Well, I want to thank you for watching this first tutorial. I'm not sure if anyone's even going to watch this, but it doesn't matter. Either way, I had fun and it was a great experience. Kind of brings back some old days when I used to be a trainer. So I hope you have a great day. Enjoy your spinal tower builds, and let me know if you have any questions. See ya.